What's up, YouTube? In this video, we're going to be looking at the third session on So You Want to Be a Code Reviewer. The code we're going to be looking at is the movie service code we were looking at in the levels of abstraction video, which was the one before this in this series. And so we're going to continue on with that. Now I'm going to try and establish a certain way in which I'm going to show the code and explain what I see as the problems and then fix it. I'm not sure if you guys want to go through that exercise. I'd personally prefer if people said, hey, just give us the code, let us find out what the problem is. And then, they could pause the video before I give the solution. So just let me know how you prefer to do this. I know some of you just like to watch. I'm not sure if that is a whole lot of learning there. But either way, that's your choice. But if you do want me to make the sort of the starter code available so you could pause these videos, see for yourselves what all are the issues, and then continue running the video and you'll see what I'm calling out as issues. So let me know that in the comments and I'll start doing that for the next series. All right. So here, the last time in the last video, we refactored this create movie method with regards to levels of abstraction. Now, when you're doing code reviews, you're looking at everything. I mean, you're looking at every kind of problem, not just levels of abstraction. You could be looking at decomposition. You could be looking at just coding standards, naming conventions, everything like this, the whole thing. So it's not the easiest thing to do, but it comes with practice, I guess, over periods of time. Now, the best way to do this is to do it for your own code. Scrutinize your own code before you send the code in for code reviews. Give it a once over, twice over, 3 times over, however, maybe you have colleagues of yours come sit next to you and ask them to see if they can find issues. All right. Because the more you do this, the keener your eye becomes to detecting the problems or noticing problems. All right. So this method here is, I guess, as good as it can be. I would like to pull this out into another method, another class, depending on what's going on in this entire system. For now, I'm okay leaving it here since it seems to be the only one that has this complex way to determine essentially translating a DB exception to a duplicate movie exception. And this is a key aspect of programming to exceptions, by the way. In programming to exceptions, even though we love throwing exceptions, we don't want to leak implementation details to the outside. So this is a database connection inherently. And the database might say duplicate key row and object, like what the heck is that? So that's one problem. The message is not clear enough to indicate what the problem is. When it's talking about indices in a database table that nobody would have a clue about, right? If you were a consumer of the system, what the heck is that? What does this index got to do with anything? Like you don't understand the implementation, and you certainly don't, as the programmer, don't want to expose the implementation to the outside. So in these cases, as part of the programming to exceptions paradigm, you would catch DB exceptions, file IO exceptions, stuff like that, and translate them to more what I call business exceptions. So the fact that an index violation occurred in the database essentially means that somebody's trying to create, in this case, a duplicate movie. So you would have to throw one of your own business exceptions, and 2, also translate the message to say, hey, this movie already exists. So this a little more user-friendly, saying, hey, there was an index violation or something, right? So that's one aspect here. But that is doing this part fine, but just the code looks a little too involved, considering that this is really what's happening here. You don't need a space here also. So, and lines, extra lines, I don't know. I mean, people think, oh, it's only an extra line. No, it makes a difference. To me, this was suggesting that somehow these 3 things are grouped together conceptually, and then these 2 are grouped differently. I'm thinking like, what's the point? What's the purpose here? So there's no reason for them to be grouped like this. So an extra line here has actually no meaning. This is now a lot, to me, is saying things. Listen, programming with intent is about show me your intent. Write code, tell me a story. Tell me what it is you're trying to do. Make it so clear that there's no ambiguity left in the way you write code. So I can't read your code in a different way and get a different message or meaning from your code. Show me your intent. That's what programming with intent is all about. All right. This question mark dot, I forget what they call this in C#, the operator, but this is with conveniences in language features, you actually end up with, it's a double-edged sword. If you misuse it, you are actually you're worse off than you were before this feature. I find people using this question mark dot just everywhere. It's like, and this is one of the aspects in programming, the exception, programming with intent, what I'd say, there's no notion of what if, maybe, just in case, don't know. You can't write code with these kinds of questions in your mind or these kinds of thoughts in your mind where you're saying, I'm doing this for just in case. No, there's no just in case. You have to know if this thing is going to be a null or not. It's not a just in case. You don't write code with, well, what if, maybe, I don't know. These are all questions you don't want the reader of your code to have or your future self to have, because the way you're writing code is adding to the question. So here I'm thinking, okay, so DB transaction, when would this DB transaction be null? Why would it be null? Now, in this case, it's probably likely because if you could not open a connection, and the reason you may not be able to open a connection here is because maybe your connection string is bad or your database is offline. Yes, so that's possible. So this DB transaction can be potentially null. And you certainly don't want to roll back because you couldn't have possibly started a transaction, right? This is going to make it difficult to test, but okay, I'll give this one. As in it's a potential problem. It is possible. However, DB connection cannot be ever null because you create the connection outside the try here. So if the connection was not able to be created, it wouldn't come in the try, therefore it would never get to the finally. And this is what I mean by this unnecessary use of that. Show me your intent. You're telling me now. Well, the previous one with the question mark, you're saying, well, I don't know, but just in case I'll, there's no harm, right? There is harm because when I read code like this, I get confused. And I'm always asking, like, when would be null? Why is it null? Should it be null? See, these are questions you should be asking yourselves when you write code. It's not okay to be safe. Don't, the funny thing is I used to call programming with intent defensive programming initially when I first started this, 10, 15 years ago. And I realized actually I'm not being defensive. I'm actually the opposite. I don't want to be defensive. I want to be very clear in the way I'm writing code. I'm not doing the what ifs and the maybes and just in cases. But most people are. So my advice to you would be, don't write code like that. Start being more sure of what it is you're writing and why you're doing it. There are no what ifs and maybes and just in cases. Well, maybe there are a few, but very, very few. When you write code very exact to exactly what you're trying to do, the conditionals disappear. The code becomes cleaner. It's more readable, less bugs, less exceptions. It's funny, people think it's the other way around, but actually you try it and you'll find that clean code, programming with intent, shows you how to write clean, to the point code without the fear of the what ifs and the maybes and the just in cases. So in this case, I don't mind these two having the question mark dot because they could potentially be null, simply because if for the same reason, if the connection could not be opened, then the command also is not initialized, the transaction is not initialized, but the connection is initialized. This will never ever be null. All right, so these are suggestions you would be making to people, like, you don't want this, remove this. Why is this? Or ask the question, when is this ever null? Now, of course, here you can see it's never null, so there's no need to ask the question. You just say it's never going to be null, so remove the question mark. All right, now this was the method we refactored in the previous session, so I'll just leave it alone. This is at the same level of abstraction here. There's no problem here. Same with that. Now you auto look at names, argument names, parameter names. Is it using all the parameters or are there some parameters extra, especially when it comes to a DTO? If you send a method a DTO, is the method using all of the DTOs, just one or two properties, while the DTO has, let's say, 15 properties, right? You don't want to send methods more information than they need. I call it the need to know basis. Send methods exactly the information they need, nothing more. So there is an issue with this method. In fact, I see right away a couple of issues with this method. So if you want to figure this out for yourselves, look at the code, pause the video, and then come back, and I'll just continue on here now and tell you what the issues are. First of all, nested usings are not a good idea. Nested usings translate to nested try finally, which is not a good idea. That's not what you want to do. Now, usings may make it simple or make it look like it's simple to a replacement for try finally and the dispose aspect, but that's not what you want. Not only, there's a problem here. There's actually a memory leak here in this method in case you haven't seen it. So if you want to pause again and figure that out, do that before I move forward. So the second problem is the fact that there's a memory leak here, which is this data reader is a disposable and it's not being disposed. So one of the things that goes missing when you have usings, you feel somehow safe and you feel like you've done your job, and then things go missing. Now you could have another third nested using, but that becomes 3 try finallys in a nested fashion. So the way I would write this code is exactly the way this method over here is written, with a try finally, and then do the disposes manually. That way you only have one try finally, and you can also have a try catch finally. Over here, there are errors, exception scenarios gone missing. Yes, the exception scenarios are not being taken care of. This is also one of those cases with the using, even though it's a really good feature in the language and has been since the very beginning, gives you a sense of false security. You are missing. Now, maybe in some cases, doing usings like this is okay, and the notion of an exception handling aspect missing is fine. But what if you can't reach your connection here? What's going to happen? It's going to blow out of here saying some network error, and the user's wondering, what network? I'm trying to get you to give me all the movies. I don't know about a network, right? So the way you would write that code, and I'll just, with the help of editing magic. So I've translated or converted that to a try finally here. And I've also got the data reader declared outside the try here, so I can conditionally dispose it of here. All right. So the memory leak has been avoided. There was a memory leak in the previous one. And of course, there are no nested try finallys now. The other thing to notice here is look at how these 3 variables are being initialized. In what order are they being initialized? And therefore, in what order are they being disposed? The way you should do this is the last one to be initialized. In this case, the data reader, when it says execute data reader, that's when the data reader gets initialized, should be the first one disposed. So they go in like reverse order. They are created as the connection is the first one, the command is the second one, and the reader is the third. They get finalized in the reverse order. Reader is the first, command is the second, connection as the third. I don't know if you noticed, but there's the same problem here. I intentionally put this in here, just seeing if you would detect that. Connection doesn't need the conditional dispose. The data reader and the command are okay. Now, if you're familiar with the data reader, you'll probably see another problem here already, which is another, let's call it a performance issue or a scaling issue, scalability issue here that may not be apparent. This map movies is using a data reader. So that's with the assumption, without even looking at the map, I'm saying, well, okay, so if you just got a data reader from your command, the map is going to be reading from the data reader. That should have been asynchronous. Since your method is already async here, and the actual reading is IO bound, as in it's an IO based workload, it should have been async. Why is it not async? So you're losing the opportunity in this case where you could add more scalability to your system. And if you're using async, then everything that can be async should be async. You don't want to pick and choose when to and when not to make things asynchronous. If you're if the method is marked with the async modifier, then everything that can be async, like opening a connection is asynchronous, executing a reader is asynchronous. Then why is not the read asynchronous? It should be. So if we look over here to the map, yeah, so this should have been read async. And then of course you need to await it here. And because you're awaiting it here, you're going to have to make this async task returning. Because I'm doing this, of course, as a code reviewer, you won't necessarily be sitting and fixing the code yourselves, or maybe, I don't know, it depends on how you do things in your organization. But I do that typically when I'm working, code reviewing with the team. So my code reviews, typically, at least when I have my own teams, I'm code reviewing with the person or with the team, right? So either I'm driving or the person who wrote the code is driving. So, the fixing is happening as the code review is going on. Okay, so this also would need the configure await false, since it is another optimization that's available. And now, of course, we can optimize this if this was streaming. If you remember, if you've seen my async streaming video, I'll put a link to it over here. This is not using streaming apparently, so I'm not going to touch that. But if it were, I'd ask them to make a slight change here. Yeah, so now that this is asynchronous, which is the key aspect, the reading is IO based. So it should have been async from the beginning. And I'm not sure why it wasn't, but people make mistakes. I mean, we're all human. All right, so that's that fixed. That means over here, I now need to make this await. So I'll put the configure await false. All right. Okay, so that takes care of this method from a code reviews perspective. I don't see an issue with this. The map to movie is fine. Now that we made this asynchronous, that's good as well. And yep. Okay, so the data manager is good. Let's look at the movie manager. Yeah, this was if you remember, if you've seen my number 2 on this series, the levels of abstraction video, I highlighted there was an issue with this method, but we never actually fixed it. I intentionally left it for this session, so it doesn't end up being a very long session, the other one. So here, I'm telling you there's a problem with this method here. So if you want to pause, understand what it is, in your heads at least, see what you think the problems are, and then start playing back. Cool. Pause. Okay. This is, to me, a levels of abstraction issue here. I'm seeing this. These two are perfect, okay? It says some gateway.getAllMovies and then some data facade.getAllMovies. Fantastic. So it looks like the movies are coming from 2 different locations, some from a database and some from an external service. And the cool part here is the implementation of this is that they are being done, they are both asynchronous, but they're being done simultaneously, so like in parallel. In other words, you're not waiting for the service to return with the movies and then going to your database and then waiting for the database to return. Both calls are being sent out simultaneously and they're both awaited. So they could, let's say if one call takes a second, each call takes a second, if you did it sequentially, even as asynchronous, you'll still take 2 seconds. The way this is being done is they're being done simultaneously. So they will both return in a second. So instead of taking 2 seconds, it'll take 1 second. And so these are tasks rather than the actual movies. And then when all of the tasks, that means it'll wait. This line will block here till both of these are done. It's not blocking from a thread standpoint, but I'm using that word. It's not a wait all, it's a when all. And then, right, so now there's 2 lists or 2 enumerables of movies, and you want to make a list to combine the 2 into one result and return the result. So it seems to me that all of this is just too much clutter for this method. Look at this method's primary thing here. That's it. One line, get all movies from a gateway. Another line, get all movies from a database. Then why is all this clutter over here? So this should all be refactored into some other method that works with the tasks and returns the movie and directly just returns the enumerable of movies. So I could include that as well. There's no need for me to skip that. So let me refactor this to another method. What are we going to call this method? Get movies from tasks. Okay. So, and this should be configure await false. All right. That's better. No need to leave a gap here since they are all at the same level. Conceptually, there's no, it's not like you have to separate out the way you think about things. You say, do this, get the movies, return it. So in my mind, at least I don't need a space here between these two things. They're all part of the same thing. And this, okay, just taking our code as it is. So yeah, now movies, yes. Yeah, so this level, this method is at the same level of abstraction now, just like this one is. These are both public methods, so they are orchestrating. If you remember my previous video on levels of abstraction, and this is a lot cleaner. So there's no bugs here. It looks all good. There's no bugs here, but yeah, just clean this out and abstract it. Extract or abstract it to a different method. It could be a different class, it could be a different method. Again, even as a code reviewer, step one is to to know there's a problem. Step two is to figure out what the right solution is. And typically, depending on systems, I'm not normally clued into all the nitty-gritty details that, especially when I've been, 4 or 5 teams at the same time. So I can't remember all the details of every one system. So I'll then work with the dev and say, okay, like, here's this thing. And, should this be a class? Should it be a method? Should it be something else? There'll be bunches of questions. The dev will give me certain answers, or the devs sometimes already know, what to look for and how to figure it out. The solution may not be the same. The problem is there, and the problem is going to be there. The solution may be different depending on your use case, depending on this system versus that system. So don't be stuck on the same solution to a given problem. The problems need to be taken out or fixed. The solutions may be different. In this case, it's a method in the same class, since that's what's happening here. But maybe there's another class that's doing something like this. For other methods, I don't know. So it could change. It could be you have a different way of handling these kinds of scenarios. The key aspect as a code reviewer is to find the problem first. The second is then, okay, so what should the solution be? Now, when you find the problem, you should also have a good explanation for the problem. If I were to ask you, if you caught an issue with my code and I said, like, why? But why do you think it's a problem? You need to have a good explanation. I don't mean this is something I learned actually over the years. What came to me initially was I knew there was a problem by looking at the code. I just felt it. One of those things. I just know there's a problem, but I couldn't explain it. So even when I worked with other people, I said, can we just take that out? It just doesn't look good. And they said, but why? What's the problem? And I said, let's just take it out. You have to grow out of that. And you have to be able to come up with a really good reason for your suggestion. It's not a feeling. It's not that's how I do it. It's not it just looks bad. It has to be more than that. So as you're developing these skills in your own code or with other people, when you're reviewing other people's code, you have to understand the reason, and you have to be able to give the person at least one damn good reason for why you say this thing is a problem and this is what you're recommending. All right, I think so. I'm going to keep this video short. This is to the extent that I think we want to clean this code up. It's not a large system, and we're only looking at the domain layer and the data layer. We're not looking at the web API layer. Maybe we could do that at some point. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like the format. If you want the format to be changed in some way, you have some idea, suggestion, please put them in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you